We're talking today with Yule Herbert, community activist and organizer extraordinaire, and we thought maybe we might have a conversation about change, hope, and sustainable development. What do you think, Yule?
Yeah, that's the biggest question there is. So, yeah, I guess I'd like to ask a question. So, I'm wondering, after your years in various trenches, where you think the most effective place to stick your nose in or pry open in order to achieve societal change, to bring the idea of sustainability to widespread use and widespread understanding. Where do you think the most effective place to focus one's energy is?
Oh, wow, that starts with an easy question. I think we're all part of a community, so I think you have to try and do your bit for your community first. But
Which community?
The community in which you live. And that it can be as simple as picking up garbage. It's always amazed me where people don't want garbage on their own property, but I live in the bush, and so there'll be garbage on the road, and I try to take the time to pick that up too, because that's part of the world in which I live. It's not just the property I own, so that's part of it for me.
Isn't that a problem with private property?
Yes, well, that's another whole issue, and who gets to own it, and do you have the right to close off a whole lake? You just opened up one of the problems I have. We bought on a small lake, and we bought because it was supposed to have the public was supposed to have a right of access to the lake. Well, now every piece of property on the lake has been bought, and the public have no access to the lake. Do we have the right to own all of this and not have anybody be able to come and see how beautiful our lake is? And of course, many of us have dogs, so it's fenced off, and I don't know. I mean, so there's these issues. So
it's interesting in Bogota, in Colombia, the mayor, I think it was 2 mayors ago, he was a philosopher actually, and he was the one who compared automobiles in Bogota to helicopters in New York. So why should we build roads for the wealthy people who can afford automobiles? It's like building helicopter ports in New York because a very small percentage of people can afford cars. So he got rid of the roads, and he built bicycle paths everywhere and walking paths. So you see these highways that are just filled with bicycles. But beyond that, back to the lake issue, he bought up all of the oceanfront. Or is it oceanfront in Bogota? Or riverfront? I can't remember which. Because it was the wealthy people who had the waterfront. And he bought it up and said, the wealthy people can afford to go to Mexico for their holidays and sit on the beach. But the poor people will probably never leave Bogota. So I'm going to buy up any waterfront that we have and let the poor people go have access to the water. So I think that was an interesting way of looking at
and what
access.
You're bringing up is because your original question was, where's the best place to work? Where's the most effective place? Maybe it's everywhere, because I've never been able to get it that in the environment we always think that if you can only experience the environment, but many of the poor don't. You're not going to ever be able to bring everybody from a city to experience wilderness. So my thinking is bring the wilderness
into the city.
Yeah, reintroduce the wilderness back into the city, and that gets me to an interesting. I hope you don't mind if I answer your question through stories.
Yeah, the best story.
There was this architect at this conference who was talking, and he was really, really provocative speaker. I forget what his name was. And he said, do you know why people don't have windows on the sides of their houses in the suburbs? And so I thought it was privacy, right? They don't want their neighbors to be able to see in. His theory is that it's because they want to believe they're in the woods, that they really are in the wilderness, and so they put themselves inside their boxes and they think that they're actually...
Because they had plants on the front and back.
Yeah, that's right, plants in the front and back, so maybe that's a little bit of the wilderness. And so it's the best, I think, like what we were working for is so interdependent and so complex. What some of my research is showing is that the most successful campaigns, like if you look at acid rain, and if you look at ozone depletion, and if you look at the landmines, for example, what were they? Strategic coalitions, people working inside systems with NGOs, civil society. Scientific consensus is very important, because I think that's one thing the media do, and they do it particularly in North America versus Europe. You'll get 80% of the scientists lined up with consensus that, yes, indeed, global climate change is here and it's real. And then there'll be maybe, 10, 15%, 20% that don't believe in it. Well, in order to make the news more sensational, they'll pick a scientist from the 80% and another from the 20%, simply to create controversy. Well, that's not educating or informing people in a meaningful way. So this, if you look at it, like we get the government we deserve. We get the politicians that we hold accountable. And if there's no scientific consensus that it's real, it's here now, they're not going to move forward.
But do you think we do get the government we deserve, or is it a more Machiavellian controlled world in which a few people are giving this government that we don't want?
Well, those are important questions. I'm going to throw it back at you. Your generation are under 30. 24% of you vote.
Yeah, well, I think perhaps that the protests in Seattle and Quebec City and so on show that we don't think we're getting the government that we deserve, or
that even represents you. That's the other thing. If you don't believe your voice is being heard, then what happens is people become disempowered and they disengage, which I think is really.
But they're not. I don't think they're being disempowered or disengaging, but they're engaging in traditional manners.
But shouldn't you?
Lots of people are disempowered for sure. But
shouldn't you engage? That's a key point, and I keep forgetting it, because the other thing is that you engage. The use of the internet is totally different. There's a real age divide. It's funny, everybody's talking about the digital divide. I think it's the age divide.
Yeah.
We experienced that recently in a meeting. But shouldn't you do both? Shouldn't you do Seattle and vote?
Well, the thing is, if you're a part of Seattle, you have no faith in voting. Voting seems so pointless, because what you see is you vote and nothing changes. But when you go to Seattle, things change.
But if enough people voted, it's that whole tension between the collective and the individual, right?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing more and more, and I think it's this loss of integrity. I hear my generation talking about they're voting strategically. Well, they're voting negatively. We don't want them, and so we're voting for them, rather than voting for
what you believe.
For what you believe in, for the best person who's going to help your community, who's best going to represent your interests, rather than all of this strategic voting. So that's sort of what I'm getting at by you get the government you deserve, because if you compromise from the very beginning, what do you get? Mediocrity.